Hi there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and the Times football reporter Charlotte Duncker. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages for you. Nunes, the Villa killer, is the Guardian's headline on that last gasp winner, while the paper also covers Oliver Glasner's comments that he feels Crystal Palace have an unfair run-up to the FA Cup semi-finals because of their schedule. What about the Telegraph? That carries a similar headline, but their main story centres on Ange Postecoglou. The paper reports that the Australian appears set to leave the club, irrespective of success in the Europa League for Tottenham or not. The Times carries an interview with Andrew Flintoff on his recovery following that horror car accident, plus Christian Romero hints his future lies away from Tottenham. We are going to start with that late winner for Manchester City up against Aston Villa at the Etihad. The lateness of that goal, I assume, making a few nervous writers up there having to tweak some copy late on into the night at the Etihad. It could prove a crucial win for Manchester City, getting them closer to the Champions League. For Aston Villa, though, that defeat leaves them 7th and now possibly struggling to make the top 5. David, I'm going to come to you on this. That last gasp winner for Manchester City, where do you think it leaves the race for Champions League football?
Well, it puts them, Dave, in pole position. I think they already were before the match, looking at their fixtures remaining this season. But that's massive, and it's no coincidence that they celebrated with such gusto, not only because it was late and dramatic, but because it carries such ramifications. I think Manchester City are going to be nailed on pretty much now for Champions League qualification, and after a bitterly disappointing season in all competitions by their standards, this was their sole focus, to get back into the Champions League. It's crucial for the rebuild. It is crucial for their finances, for attracting players in the transfer market, which I think will be another big one for them. They've already started the rebuild in January, and that's going to step up with some notable signings. It's going to be a time of change with Kevin De Bruyne on his way out. And by the way, another 6 assists tonight. I think nobody else on the pitch had more than 2. It's something like the 60th time that he's had 5+ assists, which is a record as long as Opta's been keeping these statistics. And yeah, you could sense the sort of the emotion in Pep Guardiola and his players. Guardiola has had a really tough time of it. Of course, there's been a lot of scrutiny on his position, the new contract he signed. But he looks determined to lead this rebuild. As big a night as it is for City, it's a really disappointing one for Aston Villa, whose wretched record at the Etihad continues. And that's a blow to their chances. No shadow of a doubt that it really could set them back in trying to qualify for the Champions League again. Of course, they're still in the mix. But the likes of Chelsea now have a game in hand on them, and they've got some work to do. They play in the FA Cup next, and that will probably be a welcome reprieve. But for Manchester City, this is enormous.
Yeah, Pep Guardiola said in his post-match that they've beaten one of the best teams in Europe tonight in Aston Villa. Charlotte, do you think the celebrations and the sense of relief that we saw at the end of the game really highlights how key this game was in the race for Champions League football for Manchester City?
Yeah, well, given what Guardiola said this season in terms of the way their campaign has gone, he said that qualifying for the Champions League will be like winning a trophy for them. And that's how he celebrated, wasn't it? Like they had just lifted a trophy and it was a massive step forward for them. I think it's the first time since December that they've been as high as third, in the Premier League. And it was the drama of it, wasn't it? 90 seconds to go. The game seemed to be drifting. There'd been a couple of chances for both sides in the second half, but they seemed to be cancelling each other out. And then what a ball it was from Doku, and then a nice finish from Nunes at the back post for his first Premier League goal for Manchester City. You can see the look on his face there as he puts it in. So huge moment for them in their push to qualify for the Champions League. Given the success they've had over the years, it seemed unthinkable that we'd be talking about them not qualifying for Europe's most elite competition, but it just shows how they've been grinding out results. I think it's 6 unbeaten for Manchester City now, so they're picking up form. They've obviously got the FA Cup this weekend on Sunday. They'll fancy their chances of getting through to the final in that, but it's absolutely massive for them that they qualify for the Champions League, and this was a huge step forward to doing that.
I guess when we're looking ahead to the ramifications of this result, David, you automatically have a think about what might happen in the summer. Now, I guess it's more relevant really for Aston Villa in this situation. If their hopes of qualifying for the Champions League have evaporated tonight, do their chances of signing Marcus Rashford permanently and maybe Marco Asensio permanently also evaporate tonight?
Well, their chances haven't evaporated tonight. They've got some winnable matches coming up and there will be twists and turns before the season is out. Villa's problem is their last two games look really tricky. And so they've got a huge amount of work to do. They will believe that they can still grab that place. But to answer your question, if they don't get there, it will be a real setback from a football and financial perspective. And, you know, there's that £40 million option to buy Marcus Rashford. And the way things have been going, I think they were probably and are minded to do that. I thought he was electric at times tonight and gave Manchester City, yet again, who he's got such a good record against, something really to think about. And he's kind of rejuvenated himself. I don't think he has a future at Manchester United. And so Villa would be in pole position to take him. The financial ramifications of missing out on the Champions League will be sharp. And so they'll have to weigh up the cost of whether they can still do it, whether he wants to join them. Whether there are clubs who will pay Manchester United more for him, even if Villa don't take it up. There is a lot to be decided on that front, but Rashford is very happy there and Villa are very happy with him. I think it would be interesting to see if any other players depart in order to make way for somebody like Marcus Rashford, because he's clearly being prioritised by Unai Emery, because he's starting ahead of Ollie Watkins, who's a magnificent striker in his own right. And we need to watch his future, because some of the biggest clubs around, pretty much apart from Manchester City, are going to be taking a close look at him. As for Asensio, my understanding is PSG were open to letting him stay for another season when the deal was done, even though there wasn't an option to buy. They would be open to talking about that or letting this loan continue. So that one would be dealt with in its own right. But I think as much from a football perspective, the trajectory of Villa, the ambition of their ownership, it would be a real blow, but they are not out of it yet.
Absolutely not. And also, Charlotte, I want to just ask you about the match winner tonight in Matheus Nunes. He's had a difficult time at Manchester City. Been told that he's essentially not quite good enough really to play central midfield for Manchester City. And he's going to be kind of repurposed within that setup. What could tonight do for him and his future in a Manchester City shirt?
I think he's actually come to show in the last couple of months that he can be versatile and show that versatility that Pep Guardiola needs from his players. Because, like you say, we saw him not getting any minutes in the position where he'd played so well at Wolves, which is where he came from. And we all know that he kicked up a fuss to try and get a transfer away from there. And then he went to City and wasn't playing. So he's been deployed in that full-back role. There's been games where he's been absolutely terrible. I remember being at the Manchester derby and he was terrorised in that position. But tonight he played really well. He obviously scored the winning goal. He's getting the headlines. He could be the one that helps him seal that vital Champions League qualification. Will definitely push him up the table to get them there anyway. So yeah, a huge night for him as well. But just going back to what you were saying about Villa, I think if they look at their last 4 games that they've got in the Premier League, I think they'll still feel confident, even though it's not in their hands, that they can push into that 5th spot. I mean, you've got Forest, obviously Newcastle in really great form, Chelsea a bit hit and miss, and I know they came back and won the other day. So I think Villa will fancy their chances. I think the last 2 games, like David said, difficult, but they're against Spurs and Manchester United. Who knows, both of those could be involved in the European final and have their attentions elsewhere. So Villa will look at those last 4 games and really fancy, even though they are in 7th, they're only 4 points off 3rd. So I think they will feel that if they play to their strength, they weren't played off the pitch tonight. Thought it was bad goalkeeping from Emi Martinez for City's first goal. And then if they can get to the level that we've seen them consistently deliver since January, maybe I think there's a few more twists and turns to go in that race for 4th and 5th. So I think they'll still fancy their chances in getting in there.
You never know, yes. Plenty of twists and turns still to come in the race for Champions League football. Both those sides, Manchester City and Aston Villa, preparing for FA Cup semi-finals this week as well. We are going to be taking a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning papers, including this in the Times from Charlotte. Manchester United holding talks over a potential move for Wolves' Matheus Cunha. You're watching Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, and a warm welcome back to the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and the Times football reporter Charlotte Duncker. And Charlotte, we're going to come to you on our next story. Matheus Cunha and Manchester United holding talks over a potential move for the Wolves forward. Are Manchester United at the front of the queue for this player?
As far as I know at the minute, I think there's been positive preliminary talks between Manchester United and the player, and he's indicated that if that it was to get that far, that he might be possibly happy playing for Manchester United, but we expect there to be lots of other clubs to be interested in him. He's been Wolves' standout player in what's been another really disappointing season for them. He obviously signed that new contract extension in February, which has a €75 million release clause, which means that Wolverhampton Wanderers are really expecting him to leave this summer. If someone comes and meets that number, they are expecting him to go. I think it is widely expected, especially as he did an interview last month where he said he's ready to take the next step in his career. And what is that next step for him? Ideally, probably it would be a team that's playing in Europe. Manchester United still have the chance to do that, but they would have to win the Europa League. So he's going to have lots of options on the table. He is the sort of player that Ruben Amorim would like to bolster his attacking options. Obviously, Manchester United have only scored 38 goals in the Premier League this season. That's only about 5 more than Ipswich, who looks set to go down. So sorting Manchester United's attacking problems is a really big problem for Amorim. It's a big issue for him to address this summer. Cunha can obviously play in that 3-4-2-1 system because that's what he's been playing in Vita Pereira at Wolves. And also that's obviously what Ruben Amorim plays at Manchester United. So he's versatile. He could fit in that those 2 number 10s that they play. Maybe he could play up front. He can play out wide. So there's lots of options for him. But I expect there to be lots of options on the table for him this summer. And I think it might all be dependent on whether Manchester United get into Europe or not, because it's going to be a massive rebuilding job. And obviously €75 million is a lot of money for them as well. And the PSR limit for them is strict. Getting into Europe will get them some more money. So it's hardly a done deal, but I think the preliminary talks, as we understand it, have been quite positive.
Manchester United know, David, that Cunha is able to perform at Premier League level. Is that a good thing? But I guess he's also, and they will also be aware that there have been question marks over the player's temperament as well, due to a couple of high-profile incidents. Are those question marks over his temperament fair?
Well, what we saw against Ipswich and Bournemouth raised legitimate worries about him controlling his emotions and some of his actions. He's also shown good leadership skills and the sort of attributes that you would like to see from a player of your team. So passion, quality, scores goals, has dug Wolves out of a hole at times, has actually sort of led by example. And so that's why many clubs have been looking at him for quite some time now. Arsenal have been heavily linked for a while, and you've got like sort of Nottingham Forest and plenty more besides. I think it was being reported on Sky today about Saudi interest too. But Manchester United have clearly done a lot of work on him. The clause makes it clean. They know exactly what they've got to do. I suppose it becomes active when the transfer window opens. So in the meantime, I'm sure they'll look to try and agree personal terms and make sure he wants to come. The indications are that he does and that he favours a move to Manchester United. But as Charlotte says, that doesn't mean it's done. He has Premier League experience. He plays the sort of football that Manchester United have been missing this season. Crucially, he hits the back of the net. He's creative. He plays in the final third of the pitch where United have been struggling. They'll have to work out exactly where he fits in due to the presence of somebody like Bruno Fernandes. But I do think there'll be quite a lot of change at United this summer. They'll be looking to bring in a striker too as a kind of equal priority to this number 10. And their target is Liam Delap. There'll need to be some sales too. They'll be looking at the aforementioned Marcus Rashford, Malacia, Jadon Sancho, maybe Casemiro, and a few others. So there's opportunities there. Anthony out on loan as well at Betis to kind of generate funds that would allow them to crack on with these deals. But by the sounds of it, they want to do these two pretty early. So that suggests maybe they don't need to do sales first in that particular order. They want to get these players through the door. And I think Cunha's a really good target who could flourish at Old Trafford. I really rate him as a player. Those temperament temperament concerns and his sort of social media comments, and a bit of the way he's conducted himself at Wolves may raise a few eyebrows, but it's not like Manchester United aren't used to characters of their own over the years.
And the Mirror also referencing that perhaps United want Osimhen and Cunha. Charlotte, does Cunha work when he's got a reference point as a number 9? Or can he... I'm talking really about the issues that United have had with their striker department and not scoring goals. So in order for Cunha to be a success at United, do they need to go out and sign a proper striker?
I think in order for Manchester United to be a success, regardless of whether Cunha comes or not, they need to go and sign a striker. We've seen so many times they've got balls into the box this season and there's not been anyone there to finish them. Cunha can do a lot of good work. He can score some unbelievable goals himself. But if he's delivering those good balls into the box and, like you say, there's not that focal point or that striker there to finish them, then it's all wasted, isn't it? So I think, like David said, the importance is, yes, bring in Cunha, but they need to bring in a number 9. They need to bring in a striker who can score goals. And Osimhen, obviously, there has been mentioned. He would cost a lot of money. Liam Delap, 30 million release clause if Ipswich, as we expect, get relegated. So he's a lot more attainable in terms of how much he's going to cost. So I think attacking-wise, it's going to be a really interesting summer for Manchester United, and the success of next season could depend on who they manage to get through the door.
More stories as well emerging on the future of Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham in the Telegraph. It seems to be the direction of travel that we've been talking about over the last few weeks, really. Ange Postecoglou heading for the exit. Irrelevant, really, what happens to Spurs in the Europa League, whether they go on to win that tournament or not. And then in the Mail as well, Mike Keegan has suggested that there might well be a larger, more widespread overhaul of the football department at Tottenham Hotspur. It seems as the days and weeks progress, David, that Ange Postecoglou's future, while remaining unclear, seems to be becoming slightly more clear as the days progress towards the summer.
Yeah, that's right, Dave. A number of us have been reporting for quite some weeks now that Ange Postecoglou is increasingly likely to depart in the summer and Tottenham make a change in the dugout. That's been reinforced by the reports, Matt Law in the Telegraph and Mike Keegan in the Mail this evening. And, the writing does appear to be on the wall as a result of a disastrous season domestically by Tottenham standards. They will still hope to win the Europa League, which would be absolutely massive, not just in terms of a trophy, but qualification for the Champions League. And, those reports point out that he could retain his job if that trophy is lifted. That said, it doesn't guarantee it, and he may go regardless. And I think, judging by his comments in a number of his news conferences, he probably knows what's coming. I think Ange Postecoglou has felt a little bit resigned at times when you listen to him. And in terms of the wider change you talk about, they've brought in Vinay Venkatesham, the former Arsenal chief executive, so he'll start there in the summer. There have been reports in the Daily Mail that Scott Munn will be leaving his role after a relatively short time. And it sounds from Mike Keegan's piece that they'll be looking at all different departments, data analysis, medical. They've had so many injuries. The guy that headed up that department, Jeff Scott, left previously. And so, Tottenham really do need to improve their levels on and off the pitch. And that will be something well known by the board and Daniel Levy ultimately at the top. They'll look to the transfer market, I'm sure, to resolve some of the on-field issues. But they've spent heavily. They've got a lot of good young players. And in terms of the off-field stuff, it could be a busy time as well. And there'll be candidates for that role if Ange Postecoglou goes. We've seen the likes of Iraola, Silva, today even Scott Parker mentioned as having admirers there. So it's never nice to speak about somebody in this way, but it does appear to be the reality. However, the full focus of everybody at Tottenham is this Europa League semi-final. They should get to the final, with all due respect to Bodo Glimt. And, that's why it's probably realistic that they're not having advanced conversations about Postecoglou's departure just yet. It's just an inevitable consequence of what we've seen this season.
Yeah, and also, I guess, Charlotte, you would think that Spurs would find that the stories around Christian Romero's future slightly unhelpful at the moment. He's been speaking about liking to go and play in La Liga at some point. How will Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham handle that?
Yeah, it's never helpful when a player arranges an interview and it is clear that they've got a message that they want to get across, especially when there's only a few weeks left of the season. And as David just touched on there, that huge semi-final coming up as well, which they'll want to put all their focus on there. I think the question was put to him, is there anywhere that you haven't played that you would want to play? I don't think he's just come straight out and said, hi, everyone, I want to go and play in La Liga. But he does have interest in from two clubs, at least in La Liga, in Atletico and Real Madrid. Atletico were interested in him in January. So he will be aware of that. He knows exactly what he's doing, coming out and saying what he said. Is it helpful saying that on the brink of when they're about to go into this European semi-final, when they've had such a bad season? No, it's not, but he said it now, so they're not going to let it derail the final few weeks of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him in the summer. As David mentioned there could be a huge overhaul at Tottenham in the summer. Is he going to be one of the ones to head out the exit door? He's got 2 years left on his deal, but Tottenham could look to cash in on him, especially if he is looking to other places and does want to leave.
Yeah, and Tottenham taking on Liverpool at Anfield, which, depending on what happens in the game tomorrow, whether that could well be a Premier League crowning afternoon for Liverpool against Tottenham. I just want to ask you as well about Jack Wilshere, because we're hearing that he's now going to be in charge of Norwich's final 2 games. And I just want to ask you, David, how highly he was rated as a coach within the hierarchy at Arsenal, because he's obviously been there since the back end of last year at Norwich, getting some first-team experience under Johannes Hoftorp. And now he's in the hot seat. What do we think he can achieve there? It's only a short time, but will he have eyes on the permanent job?
I think so. I think he would back himself, Wilshere, to do a perfectly capable job as a number one, because, it's been a pretty rapid descent from, his playing days only feel like they were yesterday. But he did an excellent job in the Arsenal Academy, playing a key role in the development of not only Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly, but also Max Dowman, who's coming through as well. And I think if Arsenal had their way, they would have kept him at the club. And not only because he's an Arsenal man, but because he's said to be a really impressive coach and character, somebody who's very popular and can relate to players from his recent playing career, but also assimilate into the coaching world with his own ideas and tactics and ambitions. So he's gone to Norwich, and there's a link through Ben Napper, who was the loans manager at Arsenal and is now the sporting director at Norwich. And he's got this opportunity, only a couple of games until the end of the season, and one of them is against Aaron Ramsey, his former teammate, when they play Cardiff on the final day. But Jack Wilshere, I think, has a great chance to go far in coaching. I'd back him to do really well. And from speaking to people that have seen him working at close quarters, they do too. It's a fascinating little development there. And let's see what it blossoms into in terms of at Norwich or elsewhere.
Yeah, Middlesbrough and Cardiff. Way to make us all feel low with Aaron Ramsey in charge of Cardiff. David, Charlotte, thanks so much for your time here on Back Pages tonight.